Section number 8 of the Relentless Pursuit. Let This Kill Me. This was written February 2015. Sober. What the fuck does that stupid goddamn word even mean? No booze, no dope? No booze and no dope? Does it mean none of the other bullshit vices that our lovely Western culture pushes upon us? Earthly temptations, such as, but not limited to, fast food, porn, high fructose corn syrup, internet, religion, internet porn, internet religion, pro sports, radio, Netflix, antidepressants, buffets, online degree programs, Hulu. What garbage that we are in a constant deluge of in the 21st century is socially acceptable and what will get us arrested or ostracized. I sit here at age 34 on the outside of St. Louis, Missouri, working on 100 days of being sober, quote unquote. And by that I mean no booze and no dope. While I'm sitting here sucking my own cock about how great I am from abstaining from the evils of whiskey, I sip down a steaming cup of caffeine-enriched GMO beans. This tasty beverage was made from sewage water treated with God knows what chemicals, and then filtered through a dirty machine. I make sure to top it off with a hearty amount of aspartame just to sweeten the deal. I sit here pecking away on my borrowed Mac that was built by our Lord and Savior Steve Jobs. I flip through tabs to check my Facebook, an institution built by our Messiah, Mark Zuckerberg. I reaffirm my own beliefs with a hefty dose of MSNBC, fill my ears with edited music by Spotify, check my government monitored text messages on my droid, and breathe in all the sweet pollution produced by the Budweiser plant and all the STL industries. But I digress. Let me tell you about the last 2 years of my life. I quit. It was mid-June 2013. I was in the middle of a 16-hour drive from Montgomery, Alabama to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My good friend Henry Berger from Milwaukee, Wisconsin was on tour with me riding shotgun asleep. It was about 3 a.m. when it hit me. I'm done. I decided that when the summer tour was over, I was going back to Lincoln, Nebraska to quit my job. Since the release of Last Chance of Freedom in May of 2013, a lot has happened. One of the most significant days was Friday, August 23rd, 2013. That was my last day of working for Lincoln Public Schools. For nearly 10 years, I had worked as an advocate for homeless and runaway youth and their families. To give you some background on the gravity of this situation, let me flash back to the spring of 2009. I was newly divorced. I had just finished my first solo demo in the winter of 2008 and was getting ready to start recording the full-length album that would become Country and Blues. The ultimate goal was to get out on the road full-time. However, I struggled with a sense of duty tied to my work as a youth advocate. This sense of obligation began to fade due to my frustration with the bungling, unprofessional company that I was employed with. Cedars Youth Services, that was the private agency that I was working with at the time, and they were the glaring example of the ineptitude that is common in social work. Without going into too much tedious details, I'll just say this. There is a twisted culture of dysfunction and corruption perpetuated by the incompetent CEO that trickled down like cancer in that organization. A hostile climate that was set made it impossible for employees to be effective in our roles as youth advocates and caregivers. Now, what I was really compelled to do at that time was just take my van and hit the road. I'd already started doing some short regional tours with my solo act, and I was hungry to get out and share this music and roam the country. However, in my heart, I truly felt obligated. I felt like I had to do my part to push against the greed and incompetence of a failed, inadequate system. Also, I wanted to succeed as a matter of principle. I wanted vindication. I wanted that organization some way held accountable. And in the end, I got it all. In the spring of 2009, I assisted with a government grant that was used to fund and create the homeless liaison position at Lincoln Public Schools in the Federal Programs Department. Ideologically, the intentions were noble. We were going to call out all the inequity that existed in the school system. We were going to give every student a fair chance to succeed. We would call out those who treated our youth unfairly. We would raise the graduation rate and we would give youth who hadn't had a chance before opportunity. This was pretty big for me on a personal and professional level. I'm still grateful to my former supervisors, Dr. Kramer and Dr. Steiner, for putting me in that position. I promptly went from crawling under bridges and taking homeless youth into shelters to sitting at the Nebraska State Capitol on the Governor's Commission. Within 2 years of working at LPS, I was a feature presenter at regional and national conferences on the subject of program building and adolescent homelessness. By the time I left my position at the school district, I had done work in the juvenile justice system, human service system, and the education system in my community. The fact is, the work that I did improved conditions on a lasting, systemic level for youth and families in my community. It is no small feat to change a bureaucracy, and that's what I did. In addition to that, I obtained shelter and permanent housing for hundreds of homeless youth and families. I got kids signed up for school who otherwise would not have been enrolled. I helped youth receive food, clothing, medical attention, and transportation that otherwise would not have received it. I consulted nationally with private organizations and government agencies on ways to improve their programs. And I brought national programs to help homeless, runaway, and exploited youth to Lincoln and Lancaster County. And I accomplished all this in a highly political environment that is shrouded in bullshit and ass-kissing without conforming to their good old boy ways of operation. I stepped on all the toes I wasn't supposed to step on, spoke out when I was told to be silent, and never let the integrity of my work get watered down. From non-existent to national recognition, I grew that program from the ground up. Then, in August of 2013, I walked away. I quit a Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. government job that had full health care, a good retirement plan, sick days, 2 weeks paid vacation, 3-week-long breaks when the students were out, and a salary that now be paying about $50,000 a year, which to me, $50,000 a year is a lot of money. That's to me, at least. I could have just shown up, just clocked in, just occupied a chair, laid low, and collected a paycheck. I could have just stayed and not rocked the boat, and I would have been set. However, I couldn't do it anymore on principle. I could no longer stand the overly politically correct dog and pony show that is the education system. I couldn't stand to watch people who have a six-figure job and live in comfortable suburbs deciding the fate of youth and families who live in poverty and live in homeless shelters. I wouldn't abide by supervisors more concerned with maintaining the status quo and climbing the corporate ladder than fighting for the rights of our kids. Now, on top of the economic exploitation, I found the distorted concept of cultural efficiency aggravating. That was the philosophy that my department bought into. This was the charade those in power put on in regards to race relations. This was the white bureaucrats talking about eradicating white privilege. The black bureaucrats taking it upon themselves to speak as authorities on the struggles of the American minority. The white administrators would, on occasion, admit their attitude was a symptom of their own white guilt. On the flip side, the black officials were themselves from a background of wealth and privilege, and had never suffered from the ills of poverty, neglect, and abuse. These same hypocritical leaders encouraged code switching amongst our black students. And under that philosophy, that's where the staff was instructed to encourage black students to talk and act white in public. However, in an effort to preserve black culture, staff instructed youth to continue to act black when out of earshot of the authorities. Blatant pandering like this is counter-beneficial to our youth and families. Simply put, you had people in power, both black and white, exploiting others in a vulnerable position for their own gain. On an ideological level, I couldn't stand to be a part of it anymore. A foot in two worlds, the real world versus the road. For years, any chance I could get to go on tour, I would. Some runs were as long as 2 months, while some were as short as a week. I would book them all myself, as I still do, and then I'd return to my job either as a street outreach worker or a school district homeless liaison. This cycle was extremely physically tough. In addition to the physical stress, there is pressure in that line of work at least to be some kind of Boy Scout, and that I'm obviously not. I'd go back and forth between two very different worlds. One life was governed by a time clock and routine. I'd get to work at 8 a.m. and deal with administrators, social workers, cops, counselors, and probation officers. It was a dead sprint bouncing between meetings, committees, and school and community events and coalitions. In my road life, I'd stay up all night playing loud punk rock in some of the dirtiest bars in the country, drinking and fucking as much as humanly possible, driving anywhere between 6 to 12 hours a day, traveling from coast to coast on no sleep, existing in a no-rules world filled with illicit behavior and complete debauchery. It was odd going to present at meetings in front of political officials and clergy still stinking of the sweat and sin from the road. It was awkward leading discussions about adolescent risk behaviors with poison still pumping through my veins. More than once I'd leave an in-service facilitated by Planned Parenthood sex educators to a voicemail full of consequences of the bad decisions I had been recently making. Sometimes my two worlds collided. At the end of the school year one spring, I was having clandestine relations with a woman who happened to be a colleague at a different agency. I was getting ready to head back out on the road, and it was at this time that I informed her that I was not in a place to commit to her or any one woman at that point in my life. She was hurt and very bitter about this. Through her anger and tears, she said something that stuck with me. She said the only reason that I did my social justice work and my youth advocacy work was to feel better about myself because I am a horrible person. Well, unfortunately, she's at least half right. I absolutely did the work I did to help alleviate some of the burden I felt on my conscience. My community involvement definitely eased some of the guilt my depraved lifestyle had caused me. It helped me justify myself on some level. Regardless of all this, the fact remains. I was good at my work because I am my work. Once an at-risk youth, pretty much always an at-risk adult. And one more time for the record, no, I don't believe in your religion. Yes, I am an alkie. And no, I did not wear a condom. Full-time touring equals full fucking throttle. The last 2 years were absurd. All of it is a blur of wrecked lives, wrecked vehicles, and a wrecked body. In a matter of 2 years, I managed to go from coast to coast 6 times. That's hundreds of thousands of miles, gallons and gallons of whiskey, pounds of drugs, no sleep, dirty floors and dirty clothes, hundreds of gigs, 48 states, trips to the clinic, days without food, weeks without a real shower, bad decisions whose names I cannot remember, the crushing exhaustion of the transient life on the road, the tiring cycle of living in poverty, always sick, always tired, always hungry, and always broke. Something had to give, and it finally did in April of 2014 in Seattle, Washington. I had been ill for a long time, pretty much for years. I'd even spent my 33rd birthday in the hospital of 2014 in Iowa. I was very sick and in tons of pain. At that Iowa facility, they treated me like total fucking shit. And my guess is because I went into this very conservative area and very conservative hospital, and I looked like what I was, a dirty touring musician with no insurance. Anyway, at that joke of a hospital, they first threw me in this room and had me wait for like a few hours. Finally, this softball dyke of a woman emerged. She was the doctor, quote unquote. I use that real loosely. She came in for 1 minute and she criticized me for smelling like smoke, pushed on my belly in a couple places, and just told me to drink Maalox. They did nothing. However, I got to give them credit. They did give me a $1,000+ bill as a souvenir. God bless the American medical system. Many hard months later, a friend convinced me to go to the hospital out in Bothell, Washington. Bothell is right next to Seattle. After a couple hours of wait there and a few tests, the results came back. I was diagnosed with what they call alcoholic hepatitis, with several other complications. I did not know it then, but I had been in the critical stages of liver and kidney failure for some time. Aside from the debilitating pain of this affliction, it's a killer. It turns out that 1 in 3 people die within 6 months of being diagnosed. Considering how I felt the last couple of years, death did not sound bad at all. For those of you who haven't experienced it, calling liver and kidney pain excruciating is an understatement. It's like you have broken glass and razor blade in your guts. You're always nauseous and vomit frequently. Chronic fatigue is something you deal with all the time. You puke, you piss, and you shit blood. It hurts terribly to eat. It hurts to piss, it hurts to sit down, stand, lay down, drive. And you really never sleep because you're always in this searing pain. And the neuropathy. It's like red hot shards of metal trying to poke out your hands and feet. Think of that sensation of broken glass tearing out the ends of your fingers and toes. The obvious result is intense pain, especially when you're trying to play guitar. And then, tragedy. There ain't never a good time to get real bad news. But being on the road and being seriously ill is a real bad time to get the call. I woke up one late July morning on a hardwood floor in Billings, Montana to several messages no one ever wants to get. It just said Mom is in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital via ambulance. She's had a massive stroke and a brain aneurysm. They did emergency brain surgery. You need to get back here ASAP. Things don't look good at all. I had to play 2 more shows just to get enough money to get back. I ended up leaving a festival I played in Oregon early Sunday morning. Sick, hungover, 2 time zones, 7 states, and a little over 30 hours later, I was back in Lincoln. It is a motherfucker to watch your mother die. It's a sad, sick, desperate feeling that I hope no one ever has to go through. There was nothing they could do. Her body was lying there in that hospital bed, but she was gone. After we took her off life support, it took a slow, agonizing week plus, I think about 10 days, to finally wait for her to die. After that, the next couple of months were really fuzzy and surreal. It's kind of like a dream, kind of like a haze. We had a fest down in Tennessee in August, a tour from September through early November that took me coast to coast again, ingesting everything to stay numb, anything to try to forget, anything to keep going. Now, the positive thing is when you ain't got nothing, it's one of those things, and I'm not complaining about it. It's just a hard fact that in the material sense, I pretty much have nothing. I can fit everything I have, which consists of a few changes of clothes and a couple pieces of equipment, in my 2007 Kia Spectra, which, by the way, I still owe $1,600 on. And I'm behind on payments, and the thing has 240,000 miles and is currently broke down. I've sold 3 speaker cabinets, 2 guitars, 1 bass, and my beloved Marshall head, just trying to keep in the relentless pursuit and keep it alive. As I've said before, it is a liberating feeling when you know that you're fucked. However, I can't help thinking like times like this, maybe I should have kept that $50K job. And that is why I have the general delivery blues. When you can't pay your student loans and your medical bills, people sue you. When they sue you, the sheriff comes and delivers papers. However, if you're transient as I am, you can list your address as general delivery, and it will go to the main post office in whatever town you're living in. You can pick up your mail at the post office, while in the meantime throw off those looking for you. It pisses them off, and it is fun. Hence my new song on the record called General Delivery Blues. It goes, so come and get me if you can. I am one wanted man. I'm born to fire and I'm born to lose. I've got some General Delivery Blues. So what do you do when you're sick, wanted, broke, and homeless? The answer to that question is you get the fuck out of town. I went back to Lincoln, Nebraska after tour in November for no other reason than to help my dad after his knee replacement surgeries. Obviously, Mom was no longer around to help, and he needed it, so. Being back around that area was a drunk, miserable time full of old ghosts and bad memories. In mid-December, after his second replacement, I got the fuck out of Nebraska, and I truly believe it was leave or die at that point. Lucky for me, my Sid was waiting for me down in the St. Louis area. I came down to St. Louis sick, defeated, broke. I was down as I'd ever been. My heart was sick with grief. My soul was tired and worn out. My spirit was frayed at both ends. This was probably the most frail and vulnerable I'd ever been in my entire life. Me saying that I'm thankful for Sydney is an understatement. You see, unlike myself and all my friends and family and everybody else, she's sober. She has never once drank or smoked or done any drugs. Ever. This made the impossible task of not being fucked up all the time possible. Most importantly, she gave me the unconditional love that I needed. I've sacrificed a lot over the years for the sake of music and touring, but if I hadn't been out here on the road, I would never met her. She is my moon, she is my love. Without her help, or with her help rather, I started down that long, lonely road of recovery. First one day, then 1 week, then 1 month. It is some hard fucking work, let me tell you. We soon both came to the realization that the only way for me to keep on this path to healing while I was out on the road was her to go with me. So there she came. Started down the road together. And this meant a lot of things. One of which was the possibility of accomplishing a goal that I had never thought that I could ever reach. And that was recording a full album sober. And so recording began. Now, during the last several years of Relentless touring, I've had the privilege of playing with a lot of great musicians. It just so happened that two of the best drummers I know, Johnny Lindell and Mike Chassie, are both from the Big Sky state of Montana. Thousands of miles south of them, down in the heart of the Lone Star State, lies the metal country act Whiskey Dick. Fortunately for me, all of them lent their ability to this record. Half of Let This Kill Me was recorded in Great Falls, Montana. The other half was done down in Fort Worth, Texas. I had the privilege of having Mike and Johnny drum on it. Reverend Johnson did some guitar work. Fritz did some vocals. And Sydney actually did bass on half the album. Now, I have this formula that I've been using on all three of my solo records thus far. That is, write some good songs. Get some talented, like-minded people all working together. And let them play what they want. Let them use their talent. Let them play what their heart tells them to play, and good things will happen. It's ironic that this, being the first record not recorded on Nebraska soil, is called Let This Kill Me, a Nebraska tradition of murder and alcoholism. Now, I've been asked about that. What does the album's title mean? It is 2 parts, actually. The first part, Let This Kill Me, comes from the Charles Bukowski quote of find what you love and let this kill you. And that's pretty obvious. My relentless pursuit of what I love has nearly killed me. And in fact, it still might. The second part, a Nebraska tradition of murder and alcoholism, is a little more ambiguous. Let me just say this. If I have to explain it, you're probably not going to understand it. Here's what I can tell you. Many of us who grew up in the good old state of Nebraska all heard folklore of 2 things. One, Charles Starkweather's 1950 killing spree. The other, the 1970s Bob Devaney era Nebraska football. I feel both historical events were equally as dark and sinister. Scotch, womanizing, racism, slaughter, Misty Steakhouse. The old motto of the Cornhusker State is the good life, but don't let them fool you. The heartland is a dark place filled with evil. Other notable Nebraska points. Michael Ryan's anti-government group that occupied a compound and tortured, skinned, and killed people in the early 1980s down in Rula, Nebraska. The Good Life Gangsters' unreleased rap album, Kearney, Nebraska. And statewide, we have Republicans and meth. So in conclusion, this journey has brought me here. Here sitting in this quaint little coffee shop in small town southern Illinois. I find myself as clean as I can be and as temperate as I've been in 15 years. See, I don't believe in the notion of forever with anything, but it's a good thing for now. Like I said, to me, sobriety is a very arbitrary term. Considering that, the next time you see me at the bar, I'll take a double shot of Kentucky bourbon and a beer to wash that down. Thanks in advance. I sit here proud of the fact that in the last few months, I've written enough to finish this book, and I had the album that I've been trying to make for 20 plus years. Also, my heart is in safekeeping with Sydney. Maybe at this point in the story, I've actually found what I've been looking for. If there's anything that you can take from this entire work, I hope it is the following. There is no bigger shame than a life unlived. That is the bottom line. That is the premise. On a fairly regular basis, I've had people send me a couple famous quotes telling me that this reminds them of me. The first quote's from Hunter S. Thompson. It goes like this. Myths and legends die hard in America. We love them for the extra dimension they provide, the illusion of near infinite possibilities to erase the narrow confines of most men's reality. Weird heroes and mold-breaking champions exist as living proof to those of us who need it that tyranny of the rat race is not yet final. The other passage is from Jack Kerouac, and that one goes like this. The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything all at the same time. The ones that never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars. These quotes stir the wanderlust in my soul. They speak to my ideals. They hit me on a visceral level. They are what is in my heart. However, the man that wrote the first quote shot himself. The second quote was written by a man who drank himself to death. There is nothing more cliche than the whole live fast, die young rock and roll mentality, and there's nothing more conformist than excess. In our shallow, overstuffed culture, we've confused gluttonous mass consumption of earthly pleasures and compartmentalized ventures as being the relentless pursuit. Let me be the one to tell you that these consumers are wrong. Most will never understand this value set, but many will try to buy it. This is not something that was sold to me. This is what I am. The relentless pursuit is not a vacation, it is a discipline. A curse, a blessing, a nightmare, a utopia. All things bad and good, all at the same time. I've reached a point in my life where I am certain of nearly nothing. However, I will leave you with some insight that I know to be true. Everything that you need to know you will learn on the way down. It is at the bottom where you will find the meaning of life. I will be goddamned if you can buy talent or if you can teach art, but I've learned you can earn it. You just have to suffer enough.